Welcome to Homeschooling with Classic Stories. This is kind of the second part of what we did this week to talk about the Tailor of Gloucester. So, what we're going to be talking about starts with nature. For nature this week, if you watched the last video, you'll notice that we talked about science and observation, and now we're on nature. There's kind of a lot this week. But for nature this week, what we did was we talked about the seasons. If you remember from the story, it's Christmas time, and the cat goes out into the snow without a jacket on. Even though we see it wearing clothes in other parts of the story, I didn't draw it. So, anyway, so we kind of talked about the seasons and what's appropriate to wear during that season. This is technically part of science in pre kindergarten, talking about the seasons as well as clothing choices. So, this is kind of an important skill to cover. Even if you do still dress your child and pick out their clothes, this is a skill that they need to know. So, basically, all that I had him do was all of our clothes are relatively accessible, meaning his clothes that he's currently using are in a drawer in his room, and the clothes that he's not currently using, they're for other seasons, are just kind of in like almost like a filing cabinet, kind of on the other side of his room. So he does have access to all of his clothes, but he didn't really need that much stuff where we currently live. It's nearly fall, so his clothes are kind of in a bit of a disjoint period anyway, so he has access to a lot of different clothes. So, what we did was we started with spring and progressed from there. What do you wear in the spring? What's the weather like? And so he found items that were appropriate to that. We talked about flowers blooming. We talked about it raining a lot. So he went and found an umbrella and his rain jacket and his rain boots. So that was kind of what he wore for spring. Next up was summer. We talked about it being hot. We talked about going to the beach. And so he went and got his swimsuit. So that's what he wore for summer. Fall is kind of where we are. So he really just talked about what he was currently wearing. And then he went and got his light jacket, I guess windbreaker, however you call it in your region. But that's what he got for fall. And then winter, we still have some scarves out in his like dress up bin. So he put on a scarf from his dress up bin to talk about winter. And then we looked at the cat again in the book. And some of the mice are wearing a few more clothes, and so kind of talking about whether or not they're appropriately or inappropriately dressed for the weather. But that's essentially what we did. If your child is not familiar with the seasons, if you haven't done any seasons work, this might take you a bit longer. This really didn't take us very long because we have talked about the seasons and what to expect in them. If you have some sort of poster or picture on your wall that deals with seasons, that might be nice. Or it might be nice to just go through like old photographs of you or your child in different seasons. Might be really nice to do if you're having trouble with teaching seasons. Thankfully, there are only four, at least where I live. So let's go ahead and talk about what we did next. The next thing that we covered was kind of fine motor skills, and the fine motor skills that we focused on in the Taylor story is we focused on sewing. So there was kind of a lot that we did with this week, but none of it was time consuming. My intention, I'll go ahead and show you my intention. I always love to talk about my failures in these. Look how nice this is. Look how it's still in a bag. This is this lovely little like sewing bag that you're supposed to do. Yeah, this just didn't happen this week. If you go to the store, this is real cheap. And these seem to exist everywhere in the world. So whatever your version of the Dollar Tree store um, is, you'll probably find something like this. Got little holes to make like a little kid sewing thing. Didn't happen. Anyway, things that did happen. We have this little wooden toy, this thing, and we did exactly what you think we did with it. So just kind of threading this kind of work, right? My son's threading is not great, and it was not patterned, but as long as, you know, this motion is happening, that's kind of what's important. One of the things that I wanted to make sure he saw was that, for example, if you cut from here to here and then back down like a long gap, You're not going to be able to fill all the holes because you're going to run out of string. So kind of some um, kind of knowledge of length. See, I'm already running out of string, and so I'm not going to be able to complete all the holes. So kind of having him see to stay close together was one of the things I wanted him to notice, and he did. The other thing we did, I did not bring a ribbon to show you. The other thing we did this week was we talked about knot tying. Not really, like the simplistic idea of tying a knot, meaning the idea that you take two strings, sorry, you take a single string with two ends. I'm trying to pull this out so you can see it. Single string with two ends. I did this with a ribbon, not with this, but I'll just show you now. So again, this motion, crossover, under, knot, right? So simple knot. The kind that you'll need to start learning how to do things like tying your shoes. My son takes Taekwondo, so tying his belt. It's kind of like a pre-skill that he really needed to work on. He did this sitting on the table with the ribbon on a flat surface so that he could do the X, cross down, and then pull. So this is a really important pre-skill to doing things like tying your shoe or putting on your Taekwondo belt or whatever it is. So that was important. My 2.5-year-old son, I do not usually talk about because he's not in pre-K, but kind of wanted to get in on the action, and so with we were playing with Play-Doh this week, unrelated to this, and took some dry spaghetti and pretended to sew with the dry spaghetti into the flattened Play-Doh. That seemed fun. The both boys seemed to really enjoy that, so unplanned, but if you want to do that, seemed like fun. They both had it kind of pancaked out to be like a thin, kind of badly shaped circle, and then just kind of weaving like this with the spaghetti, like the dried spaghetti. Don't use cooked spaghetti, that would be weird. Um, but kind of pretending to sew. I don't know, seemed fun to them. So if you want to do something like that, that is great too. Anything that has to do with sewing is good for this week for fine motor skills. The last thing that I wanted to talk about kind of dominated our week, and that wasn't my intention. But I'll go ahead and show you what we did. So I have the first thing that you'll need is this paper. Okay, so cut color buttons. You'll notice that there are 20 that are nicely organized, and then one stuck up at the top, 21. So if you recall in the story, 1 and 20 was part of it. So I focused on the number 21. Most pre-K students, at least at some point by the end of the year, do not stress if your child is not there yet, should be able to progress to counting to 20. So if your child is still progressing and counting to 20, don't worry about it. You've got a whole year to figure it out. So if that is your child, then you're just going to use this page. And so what my son did, I will kind of show you, was I had him take out 21 crayons. He has a box of 24. And so he picked out 3 colors to put back, and he simply colored over these, as you see here. And so there are 21 different colors that are happening here. And so he just colored them, and as he was coloring them, we counted. If your child is still working on counting, this is where you stop. You've colored, you've counted. No problem. Works great. So the next thing that I did was I chose to cut these out. My son is pretty good with scissors, but there's a lot of these, and also they're not they're not super small, but they're small enough that it's irritating. So I went ahead and cut these out. The one thing that I would say about this that I wish I had done a little differently, knowing now that we were going to use them so much, I wish that I'd either printed these on cardstock or taken them to my workplace and laminated them, because paper was should have been good, but we used them more than expected. Okay, so now you've got some buttons. By the way, if you have proper buttons in your house, you don't need this. You don't need this at all. Just get out 21 buttons. But we don't have buttons, so hence the paper. Okay. If your child is past the point of counting and is already doing some representative math, you're going to use this page next, the one that says button math. This is kind of early kindergarten skills. So if your child is at this point, fantastic. If your child is not at this point, please don't worry. It's fine. Really, I promise. I know I keep saying that. Really, it's fine. So here's what you're going to do with this. To do the representative groups, you're going to take all 21 pieces. I just kept them in a Tupperware. Go ahead and put them out on the table, and you're going to focus on one problem at a time. So 21 buttons sitting in the middle. Ask your child to move them as you see to the left and right. So this one has 1. So from this pile of 21, I'm going to move 1 over so that it's on the left. And then here in the middle, I have what's left over. It's 20 if you don't know. And then I know that that is going to equal 21 because it was originally a pile of 21. So here's what your child's going to do. Once he or she has moved the one piece over, have him or her count how many are there, and then they're going to write it into this sheet. You see my son's penmanship. It is where it is. Okay, so your child is really just going to go through with these, doing this over and over again. If this is too repetitive for your child, stop whenever you need to. You don't have to finish this worksheet. I totally and fully give you permission to just do like 3 of them and call it a day if your kid hates this. But if your kid is like mine and really, really gets strangely into number stuff, you might finish it, which means your child is going to sit at the table with those 21 buttons, moving some over to the left and then counting and then writing it down. He never figured out that it was a descending order of 20. I don't know what that says about him, or maybe about me, or maybe just cognitive development, but he never figured that out. So expect your child to just sit there and count them. Yeah. Okay. Now, I did create one more sheet because I thought that my son is decent at representative addition. So I thought, let's try some like basic grouping, skip counting, early multiplication ideas. Yeah. Okay. So me being overzealous. So that's where you have this sheet that's called button groupings. If your child is not ready for this, yeah, mine really wasn't either, but we did it anyway. So this is the ending result. So basically, this is not super helpful to you, the way that I'm holding this. I apologize. So here's what you're really going to have your child do. Have them notice the number that's here. Tell your child to hold them in their hand and to put them into 2 groups. And the groups must be even. So to do 2 groups, you know that they're going to go like they're dealing cards. Easy. This part is going to go great. Making 2 groups, going to go great. Making 3 groups, even better because there's no remainder. But they're going to do this, and then they're going to notice in their hand, oh no, I don't have enough to make even groups. Great. No problem. Have them count how many's in the group. So you see you've made 2 equal groups. There were 10 in each group, and 1 remained in your child's hand. This part, great. No problem. 3. When you do it with 3, again, so gather them all up. 3 is super manageable of a number. Count them out. It's going to be 7, and look, nothing in my hand. That worked out so nicely. And then after that is where things get real challenging, because then they have to manage groups of higher numbers. So like if you've ever seen a child deal, yeah. Anyway, do what you can and don't do what you can't. So that is all that I have for you for this week. Next week, we'll be starting our next story. I think this is a good time to end and try not to get too caught on math. I will see you for the next video. Bye.